The NES is known for some pretty bad cover art. A lot of games had absolutely classic cover art, but there were a few that really stand out. The worst thing about it is, some of the best games had the worst art. So today I'm reimagining cover art for 5 notoriously bad NES covers. Because I'm not an artist, I enlisted the help of Midjourney to make these new covers. Let's see how I did. First up, Mega Man. The Mega Man box art is a prime example of how not to introduce a classic game. The character on the cover, supposedly Mega Man, looks nothing like the iconic blue bomber we know today. Instead, he's wearing this awkward suit that looks just like a cheap costume. And he's holding this generic gun that Mega Man never uses in the game. I've always thought he kind of looked a little like Donald Trump. The background is a confusing mix of elements. Palm trees, futuristic buildings, some explosions. It seems like the artist just threw a bunch of random sci-fi stuff together and some beach stuff and called it a day. It's confusing and just doesn't do justice for the game that's inside. It's no wonder that this cover is often considered one of the worst in gaming history. Here's our redesigned Mega Man cover. You know, I don't love some of the details, like the background stuff looks a little cheesy, but Mega Man himself, I don't know, I kind of like the side profile. He's missing the blaster, but you know, what can you do? This would give you a much better idea of who you're playing as and the kind of world you're getting into with this game. A lot more than the original cover. Next, Ghost Lion. The Ghost Lion box art is a strange and misleading introduction to the game. The cover features a woman in green tights and a white top, holding a dagger and posing next to a white lion. She looks more like somebody from an 80s hair band than a video game character. The background shows a pink and orange sky with a setting sun, which doesn't help explain what kind of game it is. The lion, I mean, it looks pretty cool, but it just adds to the confusion rather than making the cover more appealing. Overall, the box art doesn't give a clear indication of the game's fantasy setting or the storyline. I think people would remember this as one of the unique NES RPGs if it would have had box art that was a little more interesting. Here's my version. I like the Ghost Lion art. You know, it feels like there's a little bit of mystery. The lion itself is kind of imposing. It feels larger than life. The protagonist is really clearly illustrated here. The whole thing feels kind of spooky. I like this cover. Almost feels a little bit Disney-ish to me, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Next up, Blaster Master. Blaster Master is a really unique game. It's combining side-scrolling with some top-down action, and you get to go from being on foot to riding around in a vehicle. It's pretty cool. It's one of the most popular games on the NES, but it's also one where the original art kind of missed the mark. It's not awful, but it feels like it missed the mark. Honestly, I do feel a little nostalgic about this cover. I don't hate it, but I don't think it fits the game all that well. Front and center, you've got this weird alien creature that looks like it just wandered out of a low-budget sci-fi movie. It's crouching in front of some geometric shape because, I don't know, 1988? To top it off, there's a giant red target over the whole scene. The background is a chaotic mix of pixelated colors, which might be trying to represent the game's environment, but it mostly looks like somebody spilled a box of Legos. The cover does a fantastic job of being confusing and not giving you a clear idea of what the game's about. Instead of showcasing, the cool tank or side-scrolling adventure, it leaves you scratching your head and wondering what kind of game you're in for. And here's the updated cover. This Blaster Master art is probably my least favorite. It uses some pixelated graphics. You've got the character, you've got the vehicle, you have some sort of enemy there on the right-hand side, but it's okay. Here's Cowboy Kid. It's an action-adventure game set in the Wild West where you play as a young cowboy on a mission to become sheriff and bring justice to the land. But the Cowboy Kid box art is a real head-scratcher. It features a cowboy with a big, glorious mustache and John Redcorn. These two stern-looking guys are just staring at you, daring you to figure out what kind of game this is. Also, isn't this cowboy supposed to be a kid? In the background, you've got your standard Wild West town, dusty streets, mountains, which is probably the most accurate part of the whole scene. But the art style is so dramatic and so stiff, it feels like a poster from an old Western movie more than a video game. And here's the update. So we've still got that Wild West vibe, but it feels much more like a kid could play this game. I don't know if this cover really gives you an idea of what's in store for the game, but it does feel more playful, and I mean, there's an actual kid rather than a grown-ass cowboy. Finally, Panic Restaurant. Panic Restaurant is a quirky little platformer where you play as Chef Cookie. You battle through a chaotic kitchen to reclaim your restaurant from evil food creatures. This is one of the most expensive games on the NES. I've got a video about that. I'll link it up in the right-hand corner here. Or left-hand corner. I don't know. It'll be linked. Panic Restaurant box art, though, kind of creeps me out a little bit. It's like a fever dream. But, I mean, I guess, then again, this game is kind of a fever dream. Right up front, you've got the chef with this weird, maniacal, like, Joker grin. His eyes are practically popping out of his head, and he's holding a frying pan like he's ready to whack the next person who asks for ketchup. And then it gets weirder. There's a carrot with a face lurking in the background. Oh, and don't miss the roasted chicken that's making a break for it. Whole thing is just absolute chaos. Then again, maybe this cover actually perfectly captures the panic in Panic Restaurant. And here's my slightly less creepy version. It definitely captures the chaos of this game. Everything that's going on in the kitchen. There's stuff flying everywhere. The chef, isn't quite right. I think if I worked a little bit more, I could make it look more like Cookie from the game. But I don't know. I kind of like it. Obviously, this sort of style wouldn't have really worked in the late 80s, early 90s. But if I was redoing the art today, something like this might make sense. And that's it. Those are my reimagined covers for these 5 NES games. Turns out, making covers is a lot harder than it looks. I mean, all the usual caveats, right? Like, this is AI, not a real artist, blah, blah, blah. But still, harder than I imagined it would be. What do you think? What are some of those really bad NES covers that I missed here? As always, thanks for watching, and thanks for subscribing.